melody is familiar. The words we'll use tonight are in Sanskrit. Sa ha Suranam Namaste. Sa ha Suranam Namaste. 1,000 names we bow before you. Sahasranam, 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 Namaste, Sahasranam, 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 Namaste, O love of all loves, hear our prayer to you. A prayer for peace, a prayer for justice, a prayer for sanity. Grant us the courage to end the nightmare of violence and the terror of war. Sahasranam, share with you tonight a little video from, I'm not sure the source, but it's a good little video presentation of about B. Griffiths. And B. Griffiths was in the mid-20th century. He was a student of C.S. Lewis, who wrote the great Chronicles of Narnia and many other books. Great thinker, author. Even the film, it's called Shadowlands, is about his meeting of a young American woman and falling in love, and he wrote about that and her death and so on. B. Griffiths was a student of C.S. Lewis. And then one day B. Griffiths felt he needed to become a monk, and he did that, and lived for a while in a monastery or two in Great Britain. And then he felt drawn to go to India, to live out his life as a Christian monk, but in the culture of the Hindu tradition of India. And he did that for many, many years. And became well known for the ashram there, the Christian ashram called Shantivan, Forest of Peace. He was an extraordinary person because he was able to bring together two worlds, at least. One was the world of Western Christian tradition, and the other was the world of Hindu tradition from India. And he speaks about this in the video, and I think if there's one thing today that Christian tradition could learn from, it's to be open and to listen to other traditions, to really learn from them, and to enter into honest dialogue. So B. Griffiths did that for most of his life. And you'll see him in the video. He's dressed in the robes of a sannyasi, a holy man of India. Yeah, let's watch a little bit of B. Griffiths. Read it. These are the names of various saints in Christian tradition. This is where they gather each day to sing and chant and pray, starting at 5 a.m.
last 2 years I've hardly moved out at all.
We have to check with the volume a little bit.
Very much called to this, not silence and solitude, but to a life which is centered in the ashram. See, many people come all the time from so many parts, and more I feel the need to be centered and to find God in myself, in the ashram, in the people, to create a center where the people come and see to find God really. And it's not easy in the West, and it's not easy in many parts of India today. People are being simply carried away by this wave of industrialization and so on. And people are looking for centers where they find God, find their inner self, find the deeper meaning of life. And that is where I see the ashram, the center where people discover themselves and discover God.
What did you find, and what do you still find most lovable about India?
When I came to India, I wrote to a friend and said, I want to find the other half of my soul. And I still feel that is very significant, that in the West we've developed this rational aspect of religion. We have a fully developed theology, which is profoundly rational, very profound in its way, but also limited. And we've not fully discovered the other side of the soul, the intuitive part. And when I came to India, I was overwhelmed with the sense of the intuitive basis of that. I was to put it in terms of the unconscious. In the West, we developed the conscious, rational mind, and developed in science and technology, and great achievement in its way. But in the East, they have lived out this other side of the mind, this intuitive, sympathetic, more poetic in some ways, but above all, more contemplative. And I'll never forget going to the Elephanta Caves in Bombay and seeing this wonderful figure of Sri Rama Shiva with his three faces, and in the face in front of you is a profound contemplation. And I suddenly realized then how India lived out the history of the indwelling God. That was really open. And so it really was a kind of love affair, and I visited many Hindu temples and discovered the whole Indian world, which is very strange, of course, at first, many people, still is to an extent. And still, it gradually enters into your unconscious. It's the invasion of the unconscious. Your conscious mind begins to discover these depths beyond conscious reasoning, at the intuitive depth, right down to the basic physical reality. You discover your physical being, and then you're in the Hindu tradition, you have the chakras, you see these centers of energy, and there's a physical base, which you find so one with the earth, with matter, with life, you see the whole background of your life, and then you have the, what's called Swadhisthana, the vital energy, it's the energy you live out your vital energy in you and in the plant world, the living world around you. Then your emotional energy, when you relate to your own human emotional experience, then through the imaginative and the rational, finally to the spiritual. So there's an unfolding of the whole human personality, but go right back to your roots in matter, in life, you see. And that's where I really see this holistic visions begin to emerge. We've got the conscious mind, which is really only a segment of reality, and we begin to relate it to the unconscious in all its levels, right to the base, physical base, and then see how the human being grows from that base and gradually develops to the highest spiritual experience. So from the base right up to the highest level. And that to me is India's understanding of that.
Could you tell us something about how your own monastic journey brought you into contact with the thoughts and the spirituality of India?
Yes, you see, I read the Bhagavad Gita, the common part of the Buddha, and the Paracatry about Sue, when I was in the 20s, you know. That was my first sort of discovery of the East. and also contemporary with my discovery of Christianity at a deeper level. And so that sort of stream entered into my life. And when I became a monk gradually, this I rather went into the background, and I focused all the time on the Christian experience of God and the fathers and Middle Ages and so on. And then in about 1940, I met a very remarkable woman, Toni Sussman. She was a German who studied, she was one of Jung's first disciples, and studied yoga in Berlin. And she and her husband, who was a Jew, came to London in the 1940s, in the 1930s when Hitler was in power, and they started a meditation center really in London. And that was my first introduction really to Eastern meditation and really Eastern spirituality as a whole. And from that point I began to discover the East, the whole idea of yoga and Vedanta, and in the 40s, until finally in 55, I was invited by an Indian Benedictine monk, Father Alapat, to come with him to India to start an ashram in India. And so we came out in 1955. We started a small community near Bangalore. Didn't last very long. And then I joined Father Francis Munro, a Cistercian monk, and we began together this ashram, Kurushimala ashram in Kerala. And there we took the Oriental, the Syrian rite, and tried to live our Christian life, according to this right Syrian rite, in the tradition of India, wearing the kadi, sitting on the floor, adopting Indian customs generally. So that was a new stage for about 10 years in Kerala. And then in 1968, I was invited here to Shantiwanam, when Father Lasso, one of the two founders of this ashram, left here to settle in the Himalayas. And when he left, I came with two monks, Kurushimala, and we began to live here. And it was very primitive when we first came. There were palmara trees, that's a type of palm, not coconut trees. Eventually we cut down the palmaras and planted coconuts. And these palmara trees were really in a kind of wilderness. There were thorns and things everywhere and just little tracks through the ashram. It was very primitive, almost a desert, you know. It was very wonderful in its way. And Father Rochina and Father Lasso were these two French fathers who were the real pioneers. And they really opened the way to an Indian Christian ashram. You see, they adopted the customs of a Hindu ashram, wearing the kadi, sitting on the floor, eating with the hands, all these simple customs traditional in India. And then they tried to live out that Christian life in the context of Hindu culture, you see. Of course, at that time, before the Vatican Council, they had the Latin liturgy and the limited horizon. But after the Vatican Council, we broke through beyond that, and we've been able now, of course, to adapt our Christian life to the whole Indian culture, we call it, which means, of course, the Hindu culture to a large extent, because Hinduism is the basic culture of India. And so, in these last 20 years, we've been able gradually to develop an Indian liturgy. And we have our prayer now with Sanskrit chanting, reading different scriptures, psalms and Bible reading, and then bhajan singing, as it's called, these pop devotional songs in which everybody joins, and then this custom of arati, waving lights before the Blessed Sacrament. So we've really developed an Indian liturgy in that way.
Writing a book is hard. Knowing if it's good, even harder. Meet manuscript analysis. It gives actionable feedback on plot, characters.
And then our next challenge was in Indian theology. And there I was influenced very much by Father Johans. He was a Belgian Jesuit who, with a companion, Father Dandois, started a magazine called The Light of the East in Calcutta in the 1920s. And he was a great Sanskrit scholar and really a master of the Sanskrit tradition. And he wrote several long series of articles to Christ through the Vedanta. And that was the sort of opening for my mind. And he tried to show how we could develop a Christian theology based not on Plato and Aristotle or St. Thomas Aquinas, but on the Vedanta. And he studied the different systems of Vedanta to try to show how they could be the means for developing an authentic Indian theology. And his work was a pioneer work, and it's taken a long time, but today in India, theologians are all thinking along those lines. We're trying really to develop an Indian Christian theology. It takes time, we're still very much in the Western mode, but the breakthrough is taking place and certainly will continue. And then the third aspect, which to me perhaps is the most important, is the development of Indian Christian spirituality. You see, there we try to adopt yoga primarily. So yoga is a whole way of life, and it's based on the body. The hatha yoga, the development of the physical aspect of it, and the pranayama, the control of the breathing. But it leads on to the Raja Yoga, the control of the mind, how to control the mind and allow the spirit to enter in and transform the person. So body and soul are transformed by the indwelling spirit. And that is where the Indian and the Christian meet. You see, we're discovering how we can go beyond the body and the mind and open ourselves to the indwelling spirit. And then we encounter the Hindu experience of God from the time of the Upanishads, where we really went beyond the created world to the uncreated, and we meet what one of our founders, Father Lasser, called a Hindu-Christian meeting point in the cave of the heart. That is to me the real meeting between the Church and the India, and that's really what we're trying to explore today.
In regard to the development of an Indian Christian theology, do you find that people today are resistant to that in some quarters?
It's taken me a long time, really, to adapt to it and to realize its significance. But it's been a fairly continuous growth. I must say, from the moment I arrived in India, in Bombay in 1955, I fell in love with India and the whole culture, so that it's grown continuously from there. But I think for many people it is a very considerable problem. You see, in the West, people have been brought up to think of Christianity as the one true religion and really to reject paganism and idolatry and superstition. You see, it's brand new for Hinduism. And for many, it's a real problem, and some simply reject it. People will say yoga is of the devil, and all this Vedantic philosophy is pantheism or monism, that different names to it. And so it's a very considerable challenge, and many find it extremely difficult to accept. But a growing majority among more serious thinkers are realizing its real significance and are beginning to discover how, as I say, we could evolve a Christian Vedanta, you see, and a Christian spirituality, introducing the basic understandings of the Hindu. And of course, then also we extend to the Buddhist, you see, because Buddhism has its own unique contribution to make. So we begin to see today the complementarity of religions, you see. That so far we've really put Christianity alone and either rejected the others or seen them merely as preparations. But today the movement is much more for this complementarity, the one divine truth, the mystery of God, is manifesting itself in these different cultural forms. And we have to see Christianity in the context of Hinduism in its various forms, and Buddhism, also Islam. So today I think it's this encounter of religions which is really one of the main factors in our life today, how we relate ourselves to each of those profound traditions of the experience of God.
So, any thoughts, responses to this little presentation?
Very cool.
Sita.
Do you have any idea how big that movement has grown there? Like, has it moved out into other communities, or?
What do you mean movement?
Well, his blending of the Hindi and Christian faith, is it growing in India?
I don't know, short answer. I suspect it remains very small.
Yeah.
India, as you know, is a culture, a nation, a people that go back thousands of years. And I think in the beginning of this presentation, I can't remember if it was this one or another, the story is that St. Thomas, Jesus' disciple, visited India.
Mm-hmm.
And over the centuries, a grand total of 2% of the population became Christian. And they just, they weren't interested.
Yeah.
They had their own ancient faith, and they were happy with that. Thank you very much.
Yep.
But 2% is 2%. And so there's always been, from the time of St. Thomas, Christians in India, right, that engagement. But in terms of the movement growing, I would say my sense is not so much. What has happened, I think, is a greater openness on the part of both Christians and Hindus to dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, that's something to be able to share without hurting each other. It's a good step forward, In this country and in academic circles, there's a great interest, particularly in graduate religion programs, in that Hindu-Christian blend. Harvard University is one of the leaders of this. And comparative religion is a huge thing. So it's,
So he's Catholic, right?
he was Catholic. Yeah, he was Roman Catholic.
So we're going to start doing chants at the Catholic Church, you think?
See, that's the real test. That's the real
Yeah.
proof in the pudding. I mean, anytime I've ever gone into a church, whether Catholic or Protestant, to try and share chants in Sanskrit like we did tonight, it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
So there seems to be a deep reluctance, and that's tragic. Because what B. Griffiths is trying to say is that by exploring, not just appreciating, but entering into the spirituality of Hinduism, our own Christian faith, tradition, spirituality is enriched, is magnified and deepened. And that's been our experience. But it's hard, as he said back then, he died in 1993. And I'm guessing that was in the 80s, maybe when he was interviewed. Very difficult make that case.
Yeah. It seems that there's some progress. At least in the Episcopal Church, a number of priests are accepting of things like chanting in the church. We had not a supply priest, interim priest for a while, that he brought his huge singing bowl and dropped it right in front of the altar. And we rang in the prayers. And he's not the only one. So maybe little by little.
Good luck to you. Take Sanskrit to your local Episcopal church here in Louisa. See how far you get. Yeah.
Jennifer just might be open to it for the congregation.
I appreciate your optimism,
Mhm.
but reality speaks another language. Any other thoughts on this video? Are you familiar with this person, Sarah? Bede Griffiths?
No, but I was kind of curious. I have a bit of a familiarity with C.S. Lewis, and I'm curious. To me, Lewis kind of had a staunch adherence to Christianity. I was curious if they ever came to disagreement at some point.
They did.
I thought so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the two of them were good friends, even though Bede Griffiths was a student, but the two of them had really great minds, and to discuss things in depth, which they both loved, so they became good friends. But they didn't agree, and C.S. Lewis was frankly like, what the hell are you doing going out to India?
Yeah. Not surprised.
Yeah. At the same time, C.S. Lewis had this mind of fantasy,
Yeah.
which went beyond Christian doctrine, which went beyond, at least traditional Christian doctrine. He was the one that wrote Chronicles of Narnia, where the great lion, the type of Jesus, welcomes everybody who seeks truth. C.S. Lewis's mind, I think the older he got, became more and more open. And I'm sure I would love to have heard the conversations between the two of them as each got older. Because my guess is, my hunch, that C.S. Lewis came around to Bede Griffiths' way of thinking more and more. But yeah, he was, anybody that writes the kind of books like Mere Christianity that he wrote, like C.S. Lewis, that was, it's this, it's not that. Whereas Bede Griffiths was saying, it can be both. So I'm sure they had some fascinating conversations in the pubs of England. Some good thoughts. So, obviously, one of the things we attempt to do here is something that reflects the spirituality of Shantivani, the ashram that Bede Griffiths really got going. And this chanting in Sanskrit is one that we did tonight. But also a deeper dive into the spirituality of India, which includes seeing God in many faces, including the feminine, which is not often seen in the Christian tradition. It's present, but it's certainly not broadcast, but India does it. It's an interesting contradiction, I find, that every religious tradition that I know of has at its heart a contradiction. It may say this, but then it does that. And to me, it's a simple matter of minding the gap. As they say in England, when you're on the train, you get off, the gap between the train and the actual platform. If you step in it, you could be hurt. But in the world of religious tradition and spirituality, there's always a gap between what people say and what they do. It seems to be human nature. Can't avoid it. And so don't get your foot stuck in the gap. You could get hurt. But that's true, I think, whether it's Hinduism or Christianity. When I was in India, I had the privilege of visiting a high school with kids, and boys and girls. And while Hindu tradition speaks highly of the feminine, divine feminine, the goddess, and so on, as you know, there are intense struggles in India for equality between women and men. And when I was there in the high school, it was quite a moment. It could have happened in any country, it could have happened in the States, but it happened, so happens, in India. And there was a moment when I invited students up onto the stage to speak. And the first ones up were the girls. In fact, there were so many girls that came up on the stage to speak that the boys didn't have a chance to speak, which was fine, because I'm sure there were plenty of opportunities. But what they said was profound. And basically what they said was that they are fighting for equality. I think the principal and the other leaders of the school were, to put it politely, mildly uncomfortable with some of the things that were said. Because the girls were just right there, this is what we want, this is what we need, let's get it done, I was like, whoa, go. Anyway, the contradiction, whether it's Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, whatever system you claim, there's always the contradiction, there's always the gap. I think the task is to become more and more aware of the gap and to work more and more to make the gap not so big as best you can. So, any other thoughts before we close with this all?
The question, they talked about Kerala and the church, the monastery there that had more or less followed the Eastern way of Christianity. Do you know anything about how they treat women?
That's a good question. You're talking about Orthodox Christianity, Eastern Orthodox Christianity?
Anything that would be considered Eastern something, yeah.
That would be a good thing for you to research. Yeah. Just ask Claude.
Why didn't I know?
Yeah. Ask AI. It'll tell you truly.
Okay, I will ask it.
Yeah. Yeah. There are differences, and that would be a good one.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we do know, that in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, priests can marry, and there can be married priests, whereas in the Western tradition, priests are not allowed to marry. Not yet, anyway. So yeah, I look forward to the report. Good job with this one. You're a good girl. So we opened with the melody in Sanskrit. We'll close with the melody as we normally sing it, as a devotional prayer to Jesus. Jesu Christe, Jesu Christe, adoro te. Jesu Christe, for the life of Pete Griffiths, for his courage and creativity, his vision to follow Jesus wherever he was led, into to the culture, be with the people of India for so many years. May we also have courage and creativity. May it be so.